This is Plant-Based Briefing, review of the plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine news of August 2025, Part 2 by Dr. Shireen Kassam at plantbasedhealthprofessionals.com. And I'm Marian Erickson, host of this curated content plant-based podcast, where I narrate articles on plant-based and vegan living with permission in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. And this article would be longer than that, so I've broken it into 3 parts. I read Part 1 yesterday, so go back and listen to that first. Now I'm reading Part 2, and then tune in tomorrow for the 3rd and final part. And now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. Review of the plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine news, August 2025, Part 2 by Dr. Shireen Kassam at plantbasedhealthprofessionals.com. Plant-based diets and mental health and neurocognitive outcomes. The role of diet in mental and cognitive health has been controversial, with mixed results from past studies linked here on vegetarian and vegan diets. This new systematic review and meta-analysis, including over 700,000 adults worldwide, helps clarify the picture. The quality of the plant-based diet is key. High adherence to healthy plant-based diets, those rich in whole fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and tea or coffee, and low in refined or ultra-processed plant foods, was associated with better mental and cognitive outcomes. People eating this way had significantly lower odds of anxiety, depression, and psychological distress in cross-sectional studies, and reduced risk of depression, cognitive decline, and dementia in long-term cohort studies. In contrast, unhealthy plant-based diets, high in refined grains, sugary drinks, sweets, and processed plant foods, were linked with higher rates of depression and anxiety. This is an important corrective to the narrative that meat-free or plant-based diets might harm mental health. Past studies often grouped all plant-based diets together, failing to distinguish between minimally processed whole plant foods and heavily processed plant-based options. The new findings reinforce that a whole food plant-based pattern supports brain health, while a diet built on refined, processed foods, even if technically plant-based, may be detrimental. The mechanisms make sense. Fiber, polyphenols, antioxidants, and unsaturated fats in healthy plant foods reduce inflammation, support vascular and gut health, and thus promote mental well-being. Meanwhile, ultra-processed foods, whether animal or plant-based, destabilize glucose regulation, disrupt the gut microbiota, and contribute to inflammation, all of which can undermine mood and cognition. Ultra-processed versus minimally processed. Same guidelines, different outcomes. Ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, now make up more than half of daily calories for people in the UK, and similar levels are seen worldwide. While observational studies have long linked UPFs with obesity and chronic disease, critics argue the evidence was only correlational. The new UPDATE trial, published in Nature Medicine, is the first to directly compare ultra-processed and minimally processed diets, while ensuring both met official UK dietary guidelines. The results confirm that processing may matter more over and above nutrients alone. In this crossover trial, adults living with overweight or obesity ate 2 different diets for 8 weeks each, one based on minimally processed foods and the other on ultra-processed products, both meeting the Eat Well Guide targets for nutrients and food groups. Despite similar nutrient profiles, outcomes diverged. Participants lost significantly more weight and body fat on the minimally processed diet, along with better control of food cravings and improved triglyceride levels. By contrast, the ultra-processed diet led to smaller weight losses, less fat reduction, and more fatigue, constipation, and reflux. It's important to note, however, that the difference in weight loss between the 2 diets was modest, about 1 kilogram over 8 weeks, and both groups lost weight and improved some health markers when following the Eat Well Guide. We do not yet know whether the benefits of minimizing ultra-processed foods would widen, persist, or diminish over longer periods. Participants also reported preferring the ultra-processed diet for taste and convenience, and fewer dropped out during that arm. This underscores that sustainability and acceptability of a diet are equally crucial for long-term outcomes. Importantly, the study also demonstrates that adhering to dietary guidelines, even when some processing is involved, can still promote health improvements. UPF group had greater LDL cholesterol lowering, for example. The UPDATE trial strengthens the case for looking beyond nutrients to the degree of processing, but it also reminds us that dietary change must be both effective and sustainable if it is to make a lasting difference. The American Heart Association calls time on ultra-processed foods. The American Heart Association, or AHA, has now weighed in on one of the most urgent nutrition issues of our time, the dominance of ultra-processed foods in the modern diet. Their new 2025 Science Advisory reviews the evidence and issues a clear message. Excess intake of UPFs is a major driver of cardiometabolic disease, and policies must move beyond nutrients to addressing processing itself. UPFs, as defined by the NOVA system, are industrial formulations made with additives, refined ingredients, and processes not used in home cooking. Observational studies consistently show that high UPF intake increases the risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and premature death, with risks rising by 25 to 60% in the highest consumers. Importantly, these associations persist even after adjusting for fat, sugar, and salt, suggesting that the harms of the UPFs cannot be explained by nutrients alone. The advisory notes several pathways. UPFs tend to be hyperpalatable, calorie-dense, and easy to overeat. They disrupt appetite regulation and the gut microbiome, and packaging introduces contaminants such as bisphenols and microplastics. At the population level, they displace healthier foods, entrench poor diet quality, and are aggressively marketed to children and vulnerable communities. The advisory clearer notes that not all UPFs are equal. Some fortified products like whole grain breads or unsweetened soy milks can play a useful role in an otherwise whole food diet. Most UPFs associated with poor health outcomes are HFSS foods, i.e. high in saturated fat, salt, and sugar. The AHA calls for a multi-pronged strategy, including front-of-pack labeling, taxes on HFSS UPFs, stricter regulation of food additives, and action on marketing. Importantly, they stress that UPFs are not just a matter of personal choice, but of food environments shaped by industry and policy. This advisory represents a turning point. Just as trans fats were once ubiquitous before regulation, UPFs are now recognized as a systemic health threat. The next step is embedding this understanding into dietary guidelines and creating food systems that make minimally processed whole foods the affordable, easy choice. Potatoes, diabetes, and diet quality. Potatoes receive a less favorable score in plant-based diet indices, largely because some studies have linked high potato intake, especially white potatoes, to weight gain, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. But this new analysis from 3 major U.S. cohorts with over 200,000 participants and decades of follow-up offers a more nuanced picture. The study found that French fries were consistently associated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. People eating 3 extra servings of fries per week had about a 20% higher risk. In contrast, baked, boiled, or mashed potatoes were not linked to increased risk after accounting for lifestyle and dietary factors. In other words, the cooking method matters. Frying potatoes, especially in oils that generate harmful compounds at high temperatures, appears to drive the association with diabetes, not the potato itself. The researchers also modeled dietary substitutions. Replacing potatoes, particularly fries, with whole grains was associated with a lower risk of diabetes, while replacing them with white rice slightly increased risk. This reinforces a central principle. The health impact of any food depends not just on its own qualities, but on what it displaces in the diet. Whole grains, rich in fiber and micronutrients, remain a more protective staple, but potatoes can still play a role in a balanced diet. These findings suggest that potatoes have been unfairly maligned in some diet scoring systems. When prepared without excess fat or salt and eaten as part of a varied, predominantly plant-based diet, they can provide valuable nutrients such as vitamin C, potassium, fiber, and polyphenols. The real risks come from processing and preparation methods that strip away these benefits and add harmful compounds. You just listened to Review of the Plant-Based Nutrition and Lifestyle Medicine News of August 2025, Part 2 by Dr. Shireen Kassam at plantbasedhealthprofessionals.com. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson. Tune in tomorrow for the third and final part of this episode, where you'll hear about omega-3 fats and physical activity across a lifetime. So please share this episode with anyone who might benefit, and thanks for listening.